Chair recognizes Ms. Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. This hearing is about crisis we're seeing at the border. So I want to talk about the crisis I deal with as I represent a district in Southern California that is so close to the southern border and is reeling from the fact that fentanyl is having on my community. The fentanyl crisis is taking over my state, and especially in Southern California that is so close to the Orange County, Riverside County, Imperial County that I represent. So I just want you to take this into consideration. 1 in 5 youth deaths is related to fentanyl. And the fiscal year 2022, nearly 2/3 of fentanyl that came across the southern border came through the ports of San Diego, Imperial counties. Fentanyl and other synthetic opioids are flooding through our southern border and have killed more than 100,000 Americans per year since 2021. So I want to talk about Chairman Xi Jinping's recent visit to my state in San Francisco, and they talked about fentanyl precursor, and they talked about maybe forming or establishing some sort of a working group, but as we know, the devil is in the details. So I've still yet to see what's in that detail. What is that working group is going to do? So what do you think this administration should be doing to stop the precursor from leaving China and ultimately entering the United States to kill Americans? And I want to address this to Mr. Wolf.
Look, I think the current discussions between President Biden and President Xi, I think it's a good first step. I think what you said is important, which is the devil's in the details. Whether China lives up to their promises that they made there, I have my suspicions, highly doubtful. What I will say is when we talk about fentanyl, we are talking about the cartels. And so this idea that I heard earlier, which is, no, we can't go after the cartels. Sorry. That just because it's going to continue the status quo. Look, we can either continue to admire this problem, we're going to continue to see 100,000 American deaths every single year, or we can get serious about it and address the underlying issue of the cartels. 2, ports of entry, I think it's very important. You need more technology there. It is false to say that all of the fentanyl is coming between ports of entry. It's where we have most of our agents. It's where we have most of our technology. So, of course, you're going to see data that says it comes through there.
I have introduced Southern Border Strategy Act just
but
to
it also
do exactly
becomes
that.
between ports of entry as well.
So let me, let's also talk about what Chairman Xi Jinping said. He reportedly made the commitments that CCP would do more to crack down on the proliferation. But if you recall, in 2019, he made those same commitments when he banned the production, sale, and export of fentanyl precursors from China to Mexico. But then he abandoned his commitment when the former speaker made her trip to Taiwan. I just want you to know that he's using my constituents as bargaining chips in the broader geopolitical competition. We just cannot tolerate that behavior. So knowing what we know today, it is clear that we should not have trusted Chairman Xi's commitment on fentanyl precursors back in 2019. And so do we have any reason to believe that he's going to keep his word today?
I don't believe so. And I think it's important to remember over the last 3 to 4 years, Mexico has developed the capacity to produce fentanyl on their own. And the cartels, it's a highly lucrative business, and they have invested a lot of money, time, and attention into this. So I think there's still work that China can do, but simply stopping the precursors from China is not going to eliminate the fentanyl coming into the United States.
Can you explain how the current administration's bilateral relationship with Mexico is failing to combat fentanyl?
Well, I think it's failing on a number of instances. Again, all of this, whether we talk about fentanyl, whether we talk about human trafficking, the illegal smuggling, it all stems from the cartels. And there's not enough being done by the government of Mexico when it comes to the cartels or to stop the illegal flow. I talked about it in my opening statement. You've got to put pressure on the government of Mexico. Mm-hmm. They are transactional in nature, at least that was my experience during the Trump administration. And you've got to push them to places that they're uncomfortable with. Simply sending diplomatic cables and asking them to do things is not going to serve the American people very well.
Thank you.
Lay's time has expired. The chair recognizes Mr. Ammo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the recognition. This is my first committee hearing. It is great to be part of the prestigious House Foreign Affairs Committee. As the son of Liberian and Ghanaian immigrants, I look forward to bringing forth my unique background to this committee during this important time for our nation and our world. And it is with that perspective, I look forward to helping shape our nation's foreign policy. It is grounded in our values of defending freedom, championing economic opportunity, upholding human rights, and ensuring that the rule of law is respected. I was impressed with how bipartisan this committee was during yesterday's markup, my first one of those as well. I've heard about this committee's rich bipartisan history. Unfortunately, today is a bit of a departure from that, and I hope we can work towards finding solutions on this critical issue. As a first-generation American, I know the importance of legal immigration to our nation. I also know the importance of not vilifying those who seek a better life for themselves and their family. And so instead of a serious inquiry around real immigration solutions, we are in the context we're in today with this hearing. The Biden administration launched a series of foreign policy initiatives to manage migration across the Western Hemisphere and has requested real funding to implement them. If this hearing was meant to be more meaningful, we would discuss the funding of the president's budget request. We would invest in partnering with governments in the region to screen migrants and support integration. We would fund operations to vet potential candidates for refugee resettlement or other legal methods of migration. Finally, the president's request would seriously fund our border security. If fully funded, our nation would be able to hire 1,300 additional law enforcement officers at our southern border. We would be able to invest in southwest border ports of entry with cutting-edge detection technology to enhance inspection capabilities, including fentanyl detection. We should make real investments in strengthening the lawful pipeline of immigrants to our nation, not choking it off. So my hope, and this is just my start, is that we can work together on a long-term strategy for comprehensive immigration reform. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Davidson.
I thank the chairman. I appreciate the witnesses being willing to come back, and I'm quite excited to be able to get in under the deadline here. So, Mr. Secretary, I think, for my lifetime, we've kind of been in this back and forth. It's border security, it's immigration, border security, immigration. As we've seen today, the two parties don't really agree much on those two solutions. I can't say that it's been an incredibly productive dialogue on this. We haven't changed anybody's minds, I don't think. But I hope we can at least agree to stop the cartels. The cartels are bad people. They're doing evil things, and they're exploiting our broken laws, and they're causing many of the disastrous situations in Mexico, Central and South America. Last summer, I introduced a bill, the Stop the Cartels Act. I've subsequently renamed it the Lizzie Murphy Act to stop the cartels, named after a 21-year-old young lady in my district, daughter of a good friend, who took a Xanax at a party that was laced with fentanyl. And like tens of thousands of other Americans, she died because the drugs she took, not a good idea, but they're not supposed to kill you. Poisoned with fentanyl, and it ended her life tragically. As I was introducing that bill last summer, the New York Times introduced independent reported journalism and said that under Trump, there was a problem at the border. The cartels were exploiting it, and they were making around $500 million a year smuggling people across the border. And that's a pretty big problem. But in a year and a half into the Biden administration, as of last summer, it was over $13 billion. Now, I was a businessman before I got into Congress. 26x your business in a year and a half. I mean, that's insane. $13 billion of growth. Another year on, and the problem's only gotten worse. In your expert opinion, as a former Secretary of Homeland Security, how can we most effectively stop the cartels?
Well, Congressman, I agree with you. I think the cartels should be public enemy number one for the United States. There's no other driver that kills 100,000 Americans every single year, particularly as it relates to fentanyl. I think, as I've said repeatedly, and I've been questioned, all options should be on the table when it comes to the cartels. What we have done historically is treated this issue as a law enforcement issue. And I would say that we have made incremental improvements around the edges, but we have not addressed the issue. You also need to provide leverage, and you got to have you need an administration willing to use the leverage against the government of Mexico. When this administration and this president says, I will never designate them as a foreign terrorist organization, I will never use military force, I will never do X, Y, and Z, it takes all the leverage that they would normally have, and government of Mexico officials are going to say, well, I don't need to do anything else because there's no repercussions. There's nothing that is going to severely impact me. So there's a number of things that you could be doing along that border, and with the leverage that we have, foreign assistance, which I know is important to this committee, and other things, there are leverage points that the U.S. government could be using to get more action and activity out of the government of Mexico, and we're not doing it.
Thank you. I do hope we can reframe the debate so we can at least agree to stop the cartels. As far as I know, there's no pro-cartel lobbyists here in D.C. Now, I will say there are no Republican-led sanctuary cities, and that's kind of a pro-cartel activity. So I'm concerned about that. It would be highly more effective, though, if people in Mexico and Central America, South America, solved their problems domestically. That would take away the whole credible fear claims that end up showing at our border, correct? So it seems like there's unanimous consent there by our witnesses. And I just wonder, you know, in El Salvador, probably not something that would go over well with our Bill of Rights in America, but seems to be pretty effective. Looks pretty peaceful and safe for people that aren't causing harm to their neighbors. Does anyone feel like what's going on in El Salvador has been effective?
In the short term, yes. Ask in 5 years. I do worry about a permanent state of emergency and what that does, and when there's no checks and balances on presidential power.
Okay.
I think what President Bukele has done in El Salvador is a miracle. And you should, in every Western country across the world, we should target criminals and gangs and cartels, round them up and detain them and incarcerate them for as long as we can.
I think what's also very illustrative about El Salvador is about a third of their GDP comes from remittances here in the United States. And so we've got to deal with this issue. I certainly agree with what he's doing regarding criminals, but we've got to provide other incentives for these countries to retain their talent, to retain their...
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my time's running out. And look, I think that's right. And I think, look, I'm encouraged by developments in Ecuador and Argentina. And we've got a lot of promise in this Western Hemisphere as we close in on the 100th anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine. I hope we protect our own backyard. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually the only person to ask you questions today who represents a border community. You know, I think that's important because illegally acting Secretary Wolf, as you said, some people just think about this issue. I actually live it every day, as does my community in San Diego. And what's interesting is despite all of the fear-mongering here today, San Diego is, not by coincidence, one of the safest cities in this country, as is every other border community. And we've heard my colleagues talk a lot about cartels. Let's talk about cartels a little bit. The growth of cartels has been mentioned a lot, but what my colleagues don't seem to mention is that actually MPP assisted in the growth of the cartels. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. So, Mr. Isaacson, isn't it true that MPP, in fact, did not stop people from fleeing violence? It just trapped them in dangerous situations in Mexico, and that it fed the cartels and other criminal gangs on the Mexico side of the border.
I heard numerous testimonies that cartels were waiting, as happened with Title 42 too, waiting at the gates of the port of entry for new kidnap victims who they could then extort their relatives in the United States, which of course is a crime that crosses borders.
So you would say that MPP did not, in fact, get rid of the cartels?
If anything, it gave them some new fuel.
Okay. We've heard a lot about fentanyl. Would you agree with what I've heard from all of the CBP officers that I spend a lot of time talking to, again, in the border community that I live in and represent, that almost all of the fentanyl that they see, and we have lots of folks between ports of entry and San Diego as well. Almost all are through legal people crossing the borders legally at ports of entry.
Every statistic I've seen, every conversation I've had with law enforcement says that. I mean, if you're apprehending 2 million people a year between the ports of entry and they don't have fentanyl on them, that should tell you a lot.
Thank you. And we've also talked a lot here today about following the law and what's illegal and illegal. Is seeking asylum illegal?
It is legal without regard to how you arrived in the United States.
Okay, thank you. And the Migrant Protection Protocol, MPP, could you tell us, was it legal in terms of the international laws and obligations that the United States is party to?
It is on our books as a law that no president had dared to use before, but the UNHCR and all international bodies did issue opinions saying it violated international standards.
Okay, so the very thing you guys are trying to propose as the way to make things more legal is in fact illegal under international law, and seeking asylum is in fact legal under both domestic and international law. I've also heard a lot of firsthand accounts from CBP agents of the logistical nightmare that MPP caused for them. Mr. Isaacson, could you speak to that?
Well, I mean, sure. It meant trying to send people back and make them wait and then have them show up at 4 in the morning. I think this is what you're referring to. Come to these video courts and then send them back again with another court date and going back and forth and back and forth. And, of course, that logistically became even more of a nightmare after Title 42 and the shutdown of immigration courts in the first months of the pandemic.
So did MPP actually make our border more orderly?
If anything, there was quite a bit more chaos there during the second half of 2019.
So the Migrant Protection Protocol is illegal under international law, made our border more chaotic, increased the cartel's ability to extort people and grew their base. And yet this is what my colleagues and your other panelists are proposing as the solution to the very real situation that my constituents are dealing with living at the border community?
Yes,
Is that right?
yes, and like every other deterrence effort, it had a short-term effect that was already starting to bottom out when the pandemic hit.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back from this
John Lake
very
yields back.
ridiculous
Let me
hearing.
just say to the witnesses, we have very limited time on the floor. Ms. Salazar, you have 5 minutes. You can take the chair, but I don't want to miss the votes. Really appreciate your generosity, willing to remain here till 5. We should be returning at 5 p.m. And I will turn it over to Ms. Salazar.
Thank you for your patience, and thank you to the chairman for lending me his chair. I feel important. So I want to continue, Mr. Wolf and Mr. Hamilton, because your opinion is highly important. And as I was telling you, I am your ally. I am on your side. I want to accomplish the same goals as you. Let me just give you a couple of ideas, and I want you to tell me, Mr. Wolf, what do you think of what I'm going to tell you? Let's suppose that we have the ability to seal the border with the best technology. Seal the border, best technology, whether it's structure or whether it's high towers and infrared cameras, whatever technology is out there. We can increase the number of border patrols. We can increase the administrative judges. We can increase immigration judges. We stop catch and release. Everyone that is claiming asylum goes into something called a humanitarian campus for 60 days. And over there, we'll have enough personnel to determine if they are granted the asylum, and if they are not, they will be returned home. What do you think about that idea?
Sorry. A number of those are obviously hypothetical situations. I think a number of them certainly deserve merit to look at further.
But I'm saying that let's suppose that it's doable. You seal the border, you create humanitarian centers, 5 of them alone. I mean,
yeah.
it sounds correct, right?
I think it's a yes.
All right. So let's suppose that we can do that, and then at some point we can then look inside and determine what are we going to do with the illegals. Do you think that we could do that and at the same time give some type of not path to citizenship, not immediate citizenship to the illegals, but some type of work, go home for Christmas, don't get deported, don't get any federal programs, buy your own health insurance. Do you think that maybe we could work something out? Do you think that there's appetite in this party and in people like you in very high positions when it comes to immigration in something like that? It's important. Your opinion is very important, so that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an issue that Congress needs to deal with. I think what you said initially is very, very important, that you have to close these loopholes, and there are many that continue to incentivize. So if you deal with the illegal population here today, but yet in 2 years or 3 years from now, you let another 10, 20 million in because the loopholes continue, you haven't solved anything.
Okay,
So
stop
it's very,
right
very
there.
important.
But we will have sealed the border with the best technology there is.
It's not just technology, it's also policies.
And what do you mean by policy?
Well, we can go down the line. You got to have
Right.
MPP. You've got, if you're not detaining everyone, MPP is certainly there. You got to address the asylum system. If you
Well, I
can't
just
detain
told
everyone.
you, but I just told you, sir, the asylum system is going to be addressed by everyone who is coming and claiming asylum needs to go into something called a humanitarian center. Is not going to go get lost in Miami.
Right.
Is going to stay there for 60 days. Do you like that idea? That's good. That ends and completely ends and stops.
I like the
gaming
idea
system.
of addressing the asylum process very quickly, and if it's within 60 days
60
or 90,
days.
I am for addressing the asylum process quickly.
So you are in favor of keeping people for 60 days, and you're in favor of sealing the border.
I am in favor of addressing the asylum system and making sure we get those who need protections quickly and those who don't need
Go
to
home.
be removed. Correct.
And then increasing border patrol and increasing the judges and increasing immigration administrative personnel.
I think all of those would help
That's
the
helps,
asylum
right?
system.
So then if that were to be in place, then what are we going to do with the people who have been here for more than 5 years, don't have any type of criminal records? What are we going to do with the illegal population? I think that's basically something that you told me that is challenging. So what is your idea? What do we do with
I think
them?
that's only a question that Congress can answer, because Congress can provide them either certain protections and certain benefits. If you're talking about work authorization, whatever it may be, that's certainly
That's what I'm trying
an
to do, but
issue
I need
that-
people like you to support ideas like mine because your opinion is highly estimated.
I am highly skeptical that we can get to the first part of your equation there.
But
with-
there's
with
no way that
securing
we
the
can
border
get to the
completely.
third if we don't have the first one sealed, which is sealing the border. So that's why I'm saying we agree.
We agree. You just have to do it.
And stopping catch and release and not gaming the asylum system. Thank you very much. And sorry, yeah. So votes have been called on the floor. So without objection, the committee will stand in recess and reconvene once the votes have ended.